Hi, Lainey, it's Nick. I thought I would answer this question of yours, and I may even turn this into a real chalk talk. Well, I can see that your comments of irregular SV rhythm and sustained SVT just don't really fit what I'm seeing. So let's see if we can go over it and maybe get you back to thinking about EP mechanisms. So let's get this out of the way for a second, and we'll scroll up. Okay, now here's where the good stuff starts. Okay, here's how I would analyze this. We have a sinus rhythm in the front here. The P waves are pretty apparent. You can even see them better when you look at the full disclosure. This one occurs a little bit early, so I would call it a PAC. And in fact, the previous strips had a lot of PACs on them. So you have a little bit of a pause here and then a sinus beat. The QRS and T look normal. Here's another PQRS-T. But now this P wave occurs on time, and this QRS looks pretty much the same as all the other QRSs. So why is this T wave so tall? Well, you should know by now, a tall T wave like this suggests that there is a PAC on top of it, and that's where this QRS came from. Now you might say, well, how do you know that? Well, the QRS had to come from somewhere. It's clearly premature, and it looks similar to the normally conducted beats except for one thing. It's much deeper. It's narrow, but it's deeper. So there is some kind of slight, mild aberrant conduction that's going on here. But to me, it's obvious that it came from this PAC. Now you have another QRS complex at a similar rate. I mean, what are we calling this? About 150 beats per minute from this QRS to this QRS, about 150, right? We change colors. The next QRS comes in a little bit faster. The next QRS comes in a little bit slower at maybe 130. But then this one comes in at a much faster rate, close to 165 beats per minute. And it's wide, but it's not terribly wide. With a good pair of calipers, I'd call this about 140 milliseconds wide, and the rate's about 160 beats per minute. And it's fairly regular, but it's not absolutely regular. If you take calipers, you can see there are slight irregularities to it. Now here's where the definitions come in. By definition, this is a wide complex tachycardia. Whether it's atrial or ventricular, that's what you have to try to figure out. So wide complex tachycardia does not mean it's atrial or ventricular. It could be either. It's simply a description of the fact that the QRS is wide and it's fast. So in your email here, you would never say that the final analysis would be sustained SVT versus wide complex tachycardia. That makes no sense. And any cardiologist is going to give you a hard time about that, especially an EP guy like me. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, the whole thing started off with a PAC. You have a slight aberrancy, which is rate related. This one was slightly aberrant too, but now the rate suddenly takes off and your aberrancy becomes much more marked. But remember, if you see the beginning, that's a very important clue of what it is. Now, is that a 100% guarantee that this is SVT with aberrant conduction? Well, no. I suppose one could speculate that there was an atrial couplet and then just coincidentally the patient goes into sustained VTAC. I looked at this very carefully and I really don't see any evidence of AV dissociation. I don't see any bumps or bites or anything that I can hang my hat on to convince me that this is ventricular. So I think there's a 98% chance, let's just say, that this is simply SVT with aberrant conduction initiated by a PAC, and it's a rate-related aberrancy. And then the way it terminates is that it just stops, and then you're basically left with this sinus rhythm with a marked sinus arrhythmia. But again, I really cannot say that I see definite AV dissociation. So with this rate, 165 beats per minute, you could be talking about atrial tachycardia with aberrant conduction. I don't think it's flutter with 2-to-1 because you'd see a little bit more atrial activity in between the QRS complexes. Now, I suppose it's conceivable that it's something like AV NRT, but it didn't really start out looking like that. But that's possible as well. But I think ventricular tachycardia is least likely. So as far as the if it's wide notify, I mean, all I can say is if it's wide, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But as a cardiologist, I would want to know that my patient went into such a prolonged SVT. And the fact that it's wide doesn't necessarily make it more dangerous. But, you know, that's your thing, and that's fine. But labeling it properly, I think that the correct answer would be SVT with aberrant conduction, but less likely monomorphic ventricular tachycardia. That would be much less likely. course, nothing's ever 100% unless you have wires inside the heart, and that's what I do for a living. And remember, you can't make everybody happy, so even if you called it correctly, there'll be some cardiologist who doesn't agree with you. But from an educational standpoint, I hope this little video helps you make sense of this strip, and I sure do appreciate your sharing it with me. It's nice to hear from you. I hope you guys are doing well, and if there's anything that I can do for you in terms of training new employees with my online course, just let me know and maybe we can talk about a corporate discount. Well, stay well. I hope you stay cool because I'm sure the weather's going to warm up one of these days. And enjoy that gazebo, will ya? Bye.